Flashcards are a study cards app. So here you can see this is our question list, and then we have our quiz. And so the quiz will generate a card based on the question and the answer. And so you can tap on the question, and what it will do, it'll give you the answer, and you can flip between them. So in the question list, you can also then add a new question. So mine might be, what is the third planet from the sun? And the answer is Earth. And then when you hit save, it adds it to our list. And then when you go back to quiz, now you have two cards, so you can go previous and next. And we could probably animate that a little bit nicer. But when you tap like how many legs does a spider have, when you click on next, it actually is going to flip back to the question, so that way you can then quiz yourself on the answer. So it's study cards. A new Xcode project, and this is going to be called, for us, we're going to call it Flashcards. So it's an iOS app. And it's going to be called Flashcards, and I'm using SwiftUI and Swift, and I'm going to use core data. I'm going to save my questions. That way when I reload the app, it's going to work again. I'm just going to save this to the desktop. And then the first thing I'm going to do as it's constructing these files is I'm actually going to get a custom font for this one. So you noticed my cards had a different font. You don't have to use a custom font. You can use the one that's provided. So mine's called Rainbow Paper. So I'm just going to drag and drop that into my Xcode project, and I do need to add it to the target, so I hit finish. And because I've had a copy in, I can now delete the original file. I don't need that font anymore because it's already in the project. And you can see if you weren't sure if you selected it, make sure that it is actually part of the target membership. From there, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to copy the font name because I'm going to need that. I'm going to go up to the blue flashcards file, into the targets and into the info. I'm then going to add a new one. It's going to be called fonts provided by application. It's already there for me, which is fantastic. When I add it, it automatically creates an array for me. So then when I open it up, it automatically has one item. I only have one item, so that's okay. And I'm going to make this item my rainbowpaper.ttf. So now my font is ready to go. So now I can jump to my content view, and you can see we're already using core data. So our next step, what we're going to do is just to change the model a little bit. And so the model, what we're going to do, we're going to create a question and an answer. So if I go to flashcards on the side and this item, we can leave this item, but I'm going to change this to question as a string, and I want an answer as a string as well. And so we can actually save each of these as items then. That's pretty much ready to go. Now the thing is, in persistence, we're creating this item with a timestamp, and remember we changed this to question, and we're going to need to have a question here. Question, and that's going to come later. And then we're going to have a answer as well. That. Whoops, not like that, like that. So now we have our items, questions, and answers. And see, it doesn't come up with it because I haven't built it since I've actually changed this. So I'm going to build it now, and it will still have some errors, but they should be just in the content view now because we're using our timestamp to sort and filter, which is exactly what's happening. So let's go back into our content view now. And you can see we're sorting by our item.timestamp. So let's sort by the question alphabetically. It doesn't really matter. And then in here, I'm actually going to leave the navigation link, but I'm just going to have like some blank text for now. We're going to replace this later. And the label is item.question. Actually, you know what? We don't even need a navigation link. Let's take all of this out and just put the text. And we're going to have dot question, and I'm going to force unwrap it, and then I'm going to have the item answer, so I'm going to put that in a horizontal stack, so that way you can see the question and the answer in the same view. In fact, let's not put the answer in, let's just leave it the question, so then I don't need a horizontal stack. And that way we're not going to give away the questions on our list view either, the answers on our list view either. Let's hit resume, we'll build and run again. And I can tell you there'll still be a problem because we're adding an item with a timestamp, which we don't have, and a question and answer, which we don't have. So we're going to have a view later on that will do all of this for me. So for now, I'm going to comment block this out, which is just like the add item. And on my toolbar, the button action is going to be add item. I'm just going to leave it blank for now. So we can still delete an item, but we can't add a new item. We've basically got our content view ready to set up. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new view that's going to hold all of these items. So let's create a new file. And this is going to hold a list of questions. So it's going to be a SwiftUI view. Let's call this question list view. And at the moment, it's going to have hello world in it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump back to content view and grab the whole view, or I can collapse this, copy, and then in our question list view, I'm going to paste that whole view in. Now, for this view to work, I'm also going to need to copy the environment managed object, etc., into our preview provider. So when I hit resume, it should actually work. It should look exactly the same as content view. And there it is. So then back in content view, now I can remove this environment object here, and I can adjust my content view to actually not hold any of these environment objects. And I'm going to get rid of all of this and then replace it. Oops. And I actually don't need my delete items or my add items or anything else as well. So I'm going to delete all of that. I'm going to start with a blank body. Now the only thing I'm going to need in my content view is a tab view. And I want to have two tab items. So I'm going to have the question list view with a tab item label. Let's call it question list, and let's give it an icon with a system image of list.dash. And you know what, let's remove this icon part and just have system image list.dash. So when I resume, it's going to show the tab item with a label, title, doesn't need, the question list, and then with a system image of list.dash. And here it is, so here's our question list. So what we're going to do is add another tab item for our quiz view. So I'm going to create a new view. This one's not going to have anything in it. Quiz view. And then back in my content view, I can create basically the same thing again, copy, paste, but this is going to be my quiz view. And let's call this quiz, and let's use a question mark. So now you'll see the question list and our quiz view. And so if I was to run this little project, so you can see our question list here, and then we can click on quiz and we can see the quiz view, which is hello world. The question list would appear if it was out of the preview. And again, this is what you would see in that question list. List view. And you can see we've kind of got everything already sorted. The only thing that we're going to need is like an add new question view. So like when we actually hit the plus that we want to add a question, that's going to be more complicated than just getting the question in though. So we're going to need an at state variable called show add question view. It's going to start with false, so it's not going to be visible. And then what we can do, we have our navigation view, we have our list, we have for each item, we have that verticals, or well, actually we have the question. We could make these bold or something else, but I think they're fine as is. And then on delete, we delete the items. That means we can swipe them or we can use the edit to then delete them. So that's all good and well. The toolbar has the edit item and then the add item. And so the add item, what happens is we're going to then make this a show our add question view is to true. So we're using that variable that we just created here to toggle if it's viewing, like creating a new question or not. And then what we can do, this text select an item, we can change that. So let's go .navigation title, and we're going to make this questions and answers. So we kind of have a bit of a, it looks a little bit nicer, and we know what's going on. Actually, you know what? These aren't even answers, this is just questions. So let's just call this questions. And just because I deleted the text select an item, I'm going to make this a navigation, a stacked navigation. That's going to mean on an iPad it's still going to display everything. Navigation view style, and we're going to go stack navigation view style, and we're going to need to initialize that one. It's not going to look any different on an iPhone, but on the iPad you will notice a difference. The last thing I'm going to do, whoops, I'm going to need that bracket. The last thing I'm going to do is find the bracket for the navigation view, like the whole view, and I'm going to then add outside of that a sheet is presented, and we're going to then use the show add question view. That's going to be as a binding, and then the content is going to be like an add question view. So I'm going to need a new view for this. Add question view, content, add question view. Fantastic. So now what's going to happen when you hit the plus, it's going to overlay our add question view. Oops, not show, just add question view. So if I hit resume, yep, fantastic, and I hit the play button, and then I can hit the plus, and it'll tab up the hello world, which is our add question view, and you can then just swipe down to dismiss it as well. So our next step is actually to add some questions. So what I'm going to need for my add question view, I'm going to need the view context, I'm going to need to fetch all of the items as well. So I'm going to copy all of this part and add it to my add question view. It's not going to change my preview, but it will mean that now I have access to my question list. Now the other thing I'm going to need to know from the user is our question and our answer. Like that. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to dismiss this view as well, or make it go back to the question list view when we're done. So I'm going to need the environment object for that. But it's not just an environment object, it's the presentation mode. Cool. So we're ready to go. So let's create in our view, instead of text, let's make this a form. And we're going to have a section called question. And a horizontal stack. It's going to have the text field. And it's going to say type your question here, and the text is going to be stored inside our question string. And I also, so when I resume, you'll see the question. But what I also want is like a little indicator beside it to show that it must be answered. You can't leave it blank. So to do that, normally in a form we use the asterisk, one of these. So you can see it appear here, and I'm just going to go foreground color red. So it's going to be a little red asterisk that's going to be appearing next to the question to show like you actually need to put one in. What I'm then going to do with this section question, I'm then going to copy this section and I'm going to paste it below. This is going to be now for my answer. And then we're going to say type your answer here. And we're going to use the answer string instead of the question string. And again, it's going to need to have an answer. So that looks pretty good. So we have a section for a question and an answer. The next part is not actually going to be in a section, but it's going to be a button. And there's going to be two buttons actually. Let's have a cancel and let's have a save or add question. So I'm going to put them side by side in a horizontal stack. Button action is going to be, and I'm going to get rid of this label. Whoops. Text cancel. So here's my cancel button. And this text, let's make this foreground color red. Because that way we're going to go like a red and a blue kind of thing. It's going to be very obvious that the two different buttons have different things. And I also want to make it as big as possible. So I'm going to go frame, max width. And I'm going to go for infinity. So it's basically going to try and scale it as big as it can. And width is a capital W. Let's try that again. So now you can see it scales as big as it can. And so what it's going to do, just when you hit the cancel button, it's going to use this presentation mode .wrapped value .dismiss. So it's going to just dismiss the current view. So that's our first button. And I'm just going to like collapse the button. Then we're going to have a second button. This one is going to be our save. Text, let's go save. And then what we're going to do, let's leave it blue, and we're going to borrow the, where is it, the max width from this one as well. So they're basically both going to be max width. In a horizontal stack, it's going to evenly fill them, so they look quite nice and even. So the last thing I'm going to do with my button, when I save, it's only going to work if the question and the answer are both basically have got text in them, right? So before I have my button, I'm then going to say if question string is not blank and answer string is not blank, then I'm going to put my button in like that, and it should actually disappear at the moment because it is not blank. Otherwise, if it is blank, then I'm just going to have text that says save, and I'm just going to go dot foreground color secondary, which is like a light gray. You can see it's going to be like, it's going to look like it's deactivated. And I'm also going to, and I'm going to also use this frame max width, so it's going to look the same as our button. It's just going to be grayed out, so you can't actually save until our question string has a question in it, and our answer string has an answer in it. And then our view will automatically update, and that'll become a button, which becomes blue, and then you can save your question. Now what we're going to need to do to add our question and answer, we're going to need to go back to our question list view. We're going to need to grab this add function that we commented out, and I'm going to cut it and paste it into my question view in here. And I'm going to uncomment it now. And when we save it, we need our new item.question is not going to be a date, but it's going to be the question string that the user put in, and the new item.answer is going to be the answer string. Answer string that the user put in. Then it's going to save as normal. So what we're going to do, our button, when we hit save, we're going to add item. I'll call that function that we just created, and then we're going to dismiss this view using the presentation mode wrapped value.dismiss. So both buttons are going to dismiss the view, but one's going to also save it to the list. That's pretty much it. That's how easy it is to do. I'm just going to default these back to blank strings, just so that way we start with the placeholder text instead. Yep, that looks pretty good. So we're up to, if you go back to our question list view, so now we have our questions, we have the add button, that's all working, and we can add our questions, that's all fine. Remember, these are only in the preview. When you actually build and run, they won't appear. So the last step is to jump into the quiz view and actually create our cards, I suppose. Okay, so in our quiz view, what we're going to do, we're actually going to create two extra views. One is going to be the card front and one is going to be the card back. So I'm going to create the card front to begin with. Oh, I've just called that Swift view. What am I doing? So this is going to be, let's start with the card front. And so this is going to have a few different things. So the first thing is a binding, and this is going to be a degree. We're going to make it a binding, but for now, I'm just going to create it as a degree so that we can see our preview update as we go, as a double. Whoops, double. And the reason why we're using degrees is because the card is going to flip, so it's going to be animated. And let's fix this. So our degree, let's start with 0. Whoops. And our text content is going to be some question. String goes here, just so we have our preview ready to go. And so the first thing I want to do is actually create a Zed Stack. And now the Zed Stack puts things in front or behind of each other in the order that they appear. So I'm going to start with a rounded rectangle with a corner radius, of 20. And here it is. And we're going to go for a stroke that is green for the question. And I'm just going to make it like slightly transparent. 0.5, so it's going to be like slightly see-through. And I think we also need to add a line width. And let's do a line width of 10, so it's quite solid. Come on, preview. Oops, and because we're using a color, we need the dot green. Here we go, so here's our green stroke on our rounded rectangle. I'm also going to add some padding to it so it pulls it off the edge of the screen so I can actually see my full rectangle. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it down again so we now have 2 rounded rectangles. Now the second one is also going to have a corner radius of 20, but this time it's going to have a fill of green with opacity 0.1. So it's going to have like a different color inside to the outside. It's going to be the same shade though, and we don't need a line width when we're looking at fill. So you can see here's my shape ready to go. The last thing I'm going to do is actually put the text in, so that I'm going to use a vertical stack for. And I'm going to have the text question, like that. And this is where I'm going to use my custom font that I created, font.custom. The name was going to be Rainbow Paper, but you can use any font you want. And the size, let's go for a size of 50, nice and big. So here's my question string. I'm then going to use the same thing again, copy, paste. And this is going to be the text content that we're going to pass into this view. So we're going to reuse this view. Like this. And it should say like question string goes here, which it does. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a line limit to this as well. So that way if it does have to wrap to the next line, it will automatically do so. I'm going to make the font size just a little bit smaller. What else are we going to do? We're going to use multi-line text alignment. And I'm going to go to center. Foreground color can be fine, and I'm going to add some padding. And I'm going to add like 25 padding. Just so we have like a bit of space around the question. Now, the only other thing I'm going to do is, if we collapse our whole Zed stack, I'm then going to, so this whole question view, I'm going to have like a rotation effect on it. Rotation effect. Actually, let's do a rotation 3D effect. And the angle that we're going to need is an angle. Degrees is going to be the degree that I put in here into my view. And then the axis is going to be x is 0, y is 1, and z is 0. So I'm going to go along the y-axis. So it's going to go sideways, not up or down. And I'm going to need another bracket to complete our rotation effect. And oh, hang on, because our axis needs to be in a bracket. And you can see here, so now what we can do, we can change our degree to, let's say, 90, and it'll be sideways, so it'll be like a slit, you won't be able to see it. And 0, you'll be able to see it, so that's how we're going to trigger it, I guess. So we're going to do something pretty much exactly the same for our card view back. So I'm going to create a new file, SwiftUI view, card back, and the card back is going to hold the answer. So I'm going to paste all of that in. Oops. Card front, copy, card back, paste. And I'm even going to use the same preview provider. Card back. And the answer string goes in this view. And again, we're going to make these bindings. So that's my last step, is I'm going to change this. So this is going to say answer instead. And then the answer string goes here, so that looks all good. So the only thing I'm going to change as well is, let's change the color. It was green, so let's make it blue, or you can make it red, or whatever you want. So I'm just going to make this blue. That's going to make my fill color blue, and my stroke is going to go blue as well, just so it kind of has a similar theme, I guess. That's pretty much it, that's done. So now that we're finished with this view, I'm actually going to change this variable to a binding, which means it's going to be really hard to pass into my preview provider. So I'm just going to update this one as well. And then delete my preview provider. And you can kind of see now my card back and front are ready to go. So back in my quiz view then, the last step is to actually use the cards. Where are we? Okay, so we're going to need a couple variables. So the first one I'm going to need is my back degree, which is going to start at 90, so it's going to be invisible. And our front degree, which is going to be 0, so our front of the card is going to be visible. We're also going to have a state variable is flipped, so I know whether or not to flip a card or not. And we're also going to have a duration and delay. And I'm going to make this a CG float instead of a double. So it's going to flip pretty quickly. The last thing I'm going to need is a question number. And then I'm going to grab all of my questions from my question list view that we've created. So I'm going to need the environment object, the fetch request, and the items. So I'm going to copy them and paste them into my quiz view, like that. And then in our body, now we can create our view. So we're going to create our vertical stack to begin with. And then we're going to create a Zed Stack. It's going to have like the two cards on top of each other. So we're going to have the card front, degree and text content. So that's going to be the front degree, and the text is going to be the items question number dot question. Force unwrap it. And then I'm going to have the card back as well. And that's going to be using the back degree, and item answer is going to go onto the back of the card. And then what we're going to do is on tap gesture, we're going to flip the card. And flip card doesn't exist yet, so we're going to create our function for that. Flip card. Cool. So underneath our Z stack, we're going to create a horizontal stack, a H stack. Okay, so I'm just going to close my preview for now. So the horizontal stack is going to say if our question number is greater than 0, then what we're going to do is create a button. Button action. If it's not flipped, then we're going to flip the card back to hide the answer. And then our question number, we're going to take away 1 from it. And our label is going to be previous question. And we're going to use our frame max width infinity. So we're going to make it as wide as we can. Now that's if the question number is greater than 0. If it's not greater than 0, we're going to just have text that says the same thing but doesn't actually do anything rather than the button. So I'm going to take this previous and I'm going to take this frame max width, and I'm also going to change the foreground color to secondary. So it's going to like have a grayed out to go previous, if that makes sense. Then I'm going to have the card numbers, and then I'm going to have the whole thing again. So I'm going to add the card numbers, and then I'm going to put the question number is, so now if the question number is now greater than our items count, now remember, items count, and we're going to take away 1 because when we're using an index we start counting at 0, but when you're counting you start counting at 1, so we've got to account for that. And then we're going to have our items.count minus 1. Okay, and then the button is going to be the same thing. If it's not flipped, then we're going to flip the card back to hide the answer, and then we're going to add 1 to our question if we can, as long as we can. And this is going to be called next. And I'm just going to replace that previous as well. That's pretty much ready to go. So the last thing I'm going to do is like a little footer that has the text on it for the card question number. So when I have text, card, question number, remember that's an index, so we're adding 1 to it, of, and then we're going to say how many cards we actually have, which is items.count. And then we have our next question. And the last thing I'm going to do is on this whole horizontal stack, I'm going to add some padding, just so it's kind of off the edge of the screen a little bit. Now, when we flip our card, we're going to reverse it. So is flipped.toggle. And then if is flipped, we're going to go with animation. And we're going to go for a linear animation for now. The duration is going to be the duration and delay that we've put at the top there. And we're going to go back, degree is going to go 90. And we're going to do the same thing again. Copy, paste with animation, linear, duration, duration and delay. And we're going to go for the front degree is going to go to 0. The reason we're doing this twice rather than both together in the same with animation block is because we want the back card to rotate out, and then we want the front card to rotate in. So if we do it together, then they'll kind of rotate on top of each other, and that's not, it looks a bit blocky. So then we're going to put an else, so if it isn't flipped, we're going to do the same thing, copy, paste, but this time our front degree is going to go -90, so it's going to rotate out, and our back degree, copy, paste, is going to go back to 0. That's pretty much it. That's ready to go. So let's see what happens. Here, we already created these before, but yours will be blank. So then you can add more questions here and then hit save, and it will add them to the list. Then when you go to your quiz view, now you can see the question, and then you can tap on it and get the answer. And you can tap back so you can kind of see the animation. You can hit next and then see the same thing again. So you can see between the two cards as well.